Good afternoon, everybody. Philip Jones here, the Martini Whisperer. Thanks for tuning in for the first of our little chats this afternoon. There he is, Simon all the way from Tokyo. Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa. Hi, Philip.
And to you, sir. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
For everyone, let me introduce Simon. We're going to spend the next 15-20 minutes talking about his experiences working in some bars in Japan, which I'm sure will be very, very fascinating, especially to me. I've never had the privilege of coming to Japan yet. I've always wanted to go. I was going to go this year, lead a tour, and that clearly, like everything else, so many other plans.
A little bit off the cards at this point, I'm sure.
Yes, it's been 2020, as the case may be. So let me introduce you, Simon, to everybody who's tuning in this afternoon. So you're originally from Shepparton, Victoria, and you've got several years in hospitality. You've been kitchen hand, you've worked for craft beer, you're now a cocktail menu consultant, you've been working in Taipei, other parts of Japan, now you're in Tokyo. So that's quite the journey. How did that all come about?
I guess, regarding, the reason for coming into hospitality, I moved to Melbourne at about 18, start university. Of course, I needed a part-time job, as we all do. My uncle just happened to run a pub in North Melbourne, and yeah, right. And yeah, I just started working there, and I was probably honestly there for 3 to 6 months. It was a very short spiel, but it just really got me excited about the industry. I knew absolutely nothing. I hadn't done any sort of research into the industry, but I just jumped in. And then I think just the next few years sort of took me on this journey. I did move to Japan probably a year after that, and I was working in this really kind of interesting, almost like a dive bar really, by Australian standards. It was sort of like a sports bar / dive bar. And again, this was obviously a very, very interesting thing to jump into in Japan, in this very local neighborhood. And I think I just really fell in love with the service side of the hospitality. We had all these great customers who would come in every day. I didn't really care too much about the quality of the alcohol, but that was obviously, But I think I just really fell in love with serving people. And then I guess, fast forwarding the next few years, I came back to Melbourne. I finished my degree. During that time, I was working at the West End in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. I think this, again, just sort of, obviously I learned a lot about the industry, a lot about cocktail knowledge at that time. Moved from there to Taipei for a 1-year working holiday. And I was sort of doing a lot of things at that time. I opened sort of I worked as a consultant at that time for a few opening bars. After that, I moved to Tokyo, and I was kind of an engineer for about 3 years. And now just recently, I've moved back permanently into the hospitality industry, working at Trunk Hotel in Tokyo. And that's been about 8 months now, yeah.
That's quite the journey. When I hear that, I think about my own start. My first job was in a fast food restaurant. Then I was a kitchen hand, an apprentice chef, and washing dishes, and just kind of worked my way up. And at all times, I just tried to work at places that I thought were the best at the time. So whether it was a neighbourhood restaurant, or then my first proper hotel as a room service waiter, and just kind of the horizon keeps shifting, actually, until you can kind of see where you can end up and all the things you can do. And
I completely agree. Again, like I said, just the first few places I was working at, I was pouring beers, I was maybe making gin tonic, a simple 1-2 mix. And yeah, things just, I guess as I got more interested, I just did a lot more research into it and looking into actually the basis of cocktails and how to actually make things. And then, eventually you're actually creating things. And I think for me, it was just such a natural process. There wasn't much, I wouldn't say there wasn't much hard work. Of course it was, but at the same time, it was just something so natural. There was no struggle. It was just really the most natural.
And they're quite nourishing. They're very nourishing on a daily basis too. I think that's what I miss. And for the benefit of people just joining us today, I'm talking to Simon, who contributes to my website. Very fortunate to have his insights last couple of years, looking at Japanese craft gins and the craft scene over there. So we're spending about 20 minutes today talking about the Tokyo bar scene and what it's like to work in a cocktail bar in Japan. And when I have those images and researching for the tour, you get the salaryman kind of bar, you know, the place where they can sit down and work their way slowly for a bottle of whiskey or something. And then you have the very classic formal style of cocktail bars. I'm thinking about bars like the Imperial Hotel, for example, and the men have worked there for like 20, 30 years on a very formal basis. You think of people like Takeo Mori-san, who's a legendary martini maker. If you go on YouTube and look up Mori-san martinis, it's just, for me, an inspiration. I can never get the ice as quiet as he does when he stirs down. And then you have a whole new wave of bars, like I think about General Yamamoto and places like that, which are very innovative and forward-looking. So can you give us a bit of a sense of where the bar scene, it's a big subject, but cocktail bars in particular at Tokyo, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, and it's also a very broad question to answer. But I mean, like you said, working in a metropolis like Tokyo, there is just such a variety from anything like the very basic izakaya to very classical cocktail bar in Ginza. But I think, I mean, talking about, I guess, industry trends is sort of a hard topic right at this point with the current environment we have.
Theoretical trends. Well, I mean, you think of, for example, we'll get to a bar in a second, but whether it's technique or certainly the impression you have is that the poise and precision of which they go about making the cocktails seems to be that the theatre, if you like, and the process is equally important as the actual cocktail itself. Have I got that right?
I think you're completely correct. I think, the Japanese cocktail philosophy is very much about, is very, very much focused on the precision and the actual technique, and about the showmanship. You find quite often in the West, even if you go into a very highly rated bar, it'll just be about, slinging the drinks out. It's all about, I guess, time. Okay, let's have 30 seconds or less per cocktail. I think in that sense, Japan is definitely more about precision. So even if it takes a lot of time to make a cocktail perfect, they will really go out of their way to do it. To give you a good example, like going to High Five a couple of years ago, as a bartender, honestly, it taking over 5 minutes to get a drink was a little bit hard for me, but, you see Ueno-san, like, literally probably taking 2 minutes to pick the ice for the martini you're going to drink. It's all hand-cut ice. He's literally picking up, a little bit too big, a little bit too small. It feels a little bit pedantic, maybe from my perspective, but it is, he's trying to make something perfect for you.
Right.
And I think that's what it's about. It's just about that excellence.
Is there much interaction, how to put it, like take a martini, for example, usually you ask the usual questions of how you like it and styles and so forth. Is there much dialogue between the bar staff and the clientele, or is it kind of like, this is how we do things and you just get off for the ride? Or...
To be completely honest with you, it probably, in Japan, it is more about, okay, this is our style, so if you order a gin martini and if you don't specify certain things, they probably will make it the way that they want to represent it. Mm-hmm. And I think especially for the Japanese market, that's quite dry compared to how I like it. But I know you love a very dry martini. I'm more on the wet side, but Yeah.
Let's take me through then. How do clientele interact then? So I'm guessing again, but the way a Japanese, am I right in thinking a Japanese clientele might interact differently than, say, a Western clientele? Say you went to your bar, for example. Is the way you interact with them different? The way that their expectations of a cocktail bar? So if you're saying you go to a bar and it takes several minutes to get a drink made, that's considered normal and appropriate. Is there a difference, though, the way people want to engage now?
I would say, honestly, the engagement is kind of similar in a sense. It is honestly not all that different, but I would say there are different sort of expectations, and again, it's just this real focus on delivery and on it looking and on appearance. I think especially making a cocktail look beautiful throughout the entire process, from pouring into the beaker, the mixing glass, how the ice looks, how they're stirring it, and then of course the eventual presentation when it's put in front of you. I think appearances are very, very important. So I guess that's a huge part of it, but it doesn't really so much affect the actual the service itself. I think it's a little bit similar interaction. I feel like, whenever I go to a bar, wherever I am in the world, you sit down at the bar and you can have great service and not so great service, but I think at the end of the day, it's a similar sort of process in that sense.
It's interesting. For everybody who's just joined us, I'm talking to Simon, who's currently in Tokyo. He writes for my website, Insights into Japanese Craft Gin and the Tokyo bar scene there, and we're talking about what it's like to work and experience a Tokyo cocktail bar. The business model must be really different too. I mean, again, the impression I have is that they're tiny for the most part, aren't they? I mean, some of these bars we've been talking about are 6, 7, 8 people. So does that mean it costs you a fortune to go these things in comparison to a regular bar?
I mean,
how do they make it work if they're taking so long? They're not trying to push people through. Very limited seating. There's no standing room. All this kind of stuff.
Excellent question. So it is very, very common in Japan to have a seating charge, and this is generally about 15 to 20 Australian dollars, just to be seated, especially at these very prestigious places in Ginza. And sort of in exchange for that, you will get, some very small, very basic snacks, which, especially at these more famous places, will keep replenishing for you. So I think, again, this whole seating charge thing, as a customer, it sort of discourages you from going to a place and having just one drink. Okay, if I'm going to spend $20 to sit down, then maybe I should spend, an hour or 2 hours here and buy 3 to 4 drinks, rather than say, I'm going to sit down, pay $20, I'm going to order a cocktail, $20, so I'm going to pay $40 to sit down and have one cocktail.
Yeah, right. It's interesting.
I think personally for me, and I think for a lot of, just the mentality about it is, okay, if I'm going to have to pay this money to sit down, then I'm going to enjoy and I'm really going to go through a couple of drinks. And I think, I guess that's one of the huge differences between Australian bars versus Japanese bars. We would often go for, one drink, and then we'll jump to the next place, grab another drink, go to the next place, have dinner, and then we'll go a few more places throughout the night. But I feel here, probably in the course of a night, especially if we're going to these places that have a table charge, maybe 1, maybe 2 bars per night. So it just makes the experience more
total in a way, more total too, isn't it? Yeah, it sounds like.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
That's fascinating. What about let's bring it back to you. So we touched before how you've done everything from a pub in Melbourne, you're working at a dive bar in Japan, and now you're at Trunk. So, and we've touched on how the decision. So how'd that come about? I mean, how do you get a job in a bar like Trunk in Japan? Like, is it you get tapped on the shoulder, you get word of mouth, you were just reached out? How does that work?
I think for me, like I'd originally gone to Trunk as a guest whilst I was still an engineer, and I'd been doing this like weekend work out in this rum bar in Kawasaki, which I still like help out from time to time.
Cool.
But yeah, I think for me, I came to Trunk, and Trunk is sort of a boutique. To give a very brief introduction, it's like a boutique hotel in central Tokyo. But I think generally speaking, it's not a super traditional Japanese environment in that sense. Especially like our bar team is super international. We've got people from everywhere. But I think for me, I just really loved the concept of hotel, and yeah, I mean, I just I sent them an email and a CV, and they got back to me pretty quickly. And obviously, like moving from IT back into hospitality, it was quite a lowerage of expectations and salary, but it was something I really wanted to get back into. So,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, process itself was just like any other.
How do they train then? Because we're touching about precision and how precision is so important, and technique is so important in a cocktail sense in a bar, or the expectations of clientele towards that. What sort of training, or are you mentored at all? I mean, you obviously brought your own skill sets along to the bar, but how's that work in a practical sense?
Very good question. I think, personally for me, there wasn't too much of a period when I wasn't actually already making cocktails for customers, because there was already an expectation built. But definitely, like when we are having new staff coming in, who have not too much knowledge, or maybe, especially for the part-timers who have worked at other bars, but they know that bar standard, but not our standard.
Right.
There is definitely a period of about a month where we are having very rigid precision testing, tasting like every other week, to see how they're progressing before we even allow them to make something for a customer. I think we're still obviously sort of on the light side compared to some other bars. You might even hear places in Ginza that they don't let a new bartender make a drink for a customer until they've been there for at least a year or 2 years. Like,
that's some investment too, because the expectation would be this person's going to stick around for quite a while.
Precisely. So maybe this person is learning the recipes, they're learning the procedures on how to make the premixes, how to cut the ice. But yeah, I think for some of these places, it is a very investment process in your future.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
For us, it's still a little bit more on the relaxed side, but we still do have at least a month or so before our part-timers can actually start making drinks for the guests.
So it should be. So I'm a Westerner. I'm coming to a Japanese bar for the first time, one of these high-end numbers, like High Five or something like that. We touched on at the door charge. Just what your pro tips on, you're new to the whole scene, how to make the most of it and how to just interact, find the bar, how's that all work? Can you book ahead? All the 101 stuff. Can you help with that?
Yeah, okay. The great thing about Japanese bars, even these very tiny places, most of them you can book. And it is a very good idea to book in advance because they fill up fast. As you're saying, a lot of these bars are, maybe 6 to 12 people capacity.
And you've got to be able to find them too. They're pretty out of the way sometimes.
They're pretty out of the way. Not only that, but, most of them open at 6 by 6:30, unless you had reserved in advance. You just can't get a seat. Putting aside this period.
Yeah.
But I think also it really depends on where you're going, but it is always a good idea to, I guess, dress to impress. Putting on a collared shirt, putting on a pair of trousers, and some dress shoes is never is never a bad decision, because there are a lot of places here that do have pretty rigid dress requirements.
Interesting. Yeah.
Especially for Ginza. If you try to show up there even in the middle of summer in a pair of shorts, a singlet and some thongs, again, just use your common sense. But
might be more comfortable somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, that's pretty much the only advice I can really give. Most places do have a menu. There are a few places that don't have a menu, but they'll generally work with you to find something that you're interested in drinking. So otherwise, just leave it in the hands of your, I'm sure, more than capable bartender.
I'm sure. And coming back to you and your own experience about now you've gone from that side of the bar to the other side of the bar, now Trunk. The rewards we've been touching, the theme that's been coming out a lot today, how rewarding, the actual experience of working hospitality is just on a day-to-day basis. And I know what you mean. I miss it a lot myself, like in terms of the things I used to love, no matter how bad, when I ran restaurants, how bad the shift was. It was always complete in and of itself. Yeah, it was a good shift, sometimes a not so good shift, sometimes a great shift. And you had that camaraderie of what you went through that night, and then you're done and dusted, and tomorrow's a whole nother deal, and you can reply yourself again to striving for excellence and moving forward. And I really kind of get where you're coming from there. So your rewards are personal rewards in the work that you do, is what I'm hearing. But how do your clientele, like, you hear about Japanese Reserve, for example, if they really like your drink or your service, do they show their appreciation, or is it a bit more formal than that?
Yeah, so obviously in the Western world, if you appreciated an experience, if you appreciated a product, you would probably tip, right? I mean, even in Australia, it's not a very common practice to tip, but it's also, I feel, in the service industry, not uncommon. Or maybe this is very personal, but if someone gave me excellent service in, say, Melbourne or Sydney, I would definitely tip. In Japan, like, tipping is a huge no-no.
Really?
But funny thing...
Sorry to interrupt you, Simon, but service fee kind of built into the price of the drinks? Is that how it works? Yeah?
So yeah, we were talking about the table charge. A lot of places don't have it, some do. Obviously, the expectation is that the places that have the table charge are charging you for the service you're giving. Obviously, me personally, we're a hotel, we don't have a table charge.
Yeah.
But we also don't expect tips, because just in general, Japanese society is not built around that. But what you do find, that, which is very interesting, is if guests really do appreciate you, they will generally have a drink with you, which of course they will pay for.
Interesting.
So I guess that's kind of the difference. I didn't have this too much in Australia. Occasionally you'd have a guest come and say, okay, let's grab a round of shots, you included. But Trunk, I guess not so much, because it's a little bit more of a formal environment. But let's take my Kawasaki job. The rum bar. I was working at Kawasaki for the last couple of years. Some nights I would be drinking pretty much the entire night, and I wouldn't say not of my own accord, but I would customer A, customer B, customer C. Simon, what are you drinking? Do you want to have something? I'm going to buy it. And that's a very common custom here, I would say.
And I'm guessing you can't really say no because you don't want to offend.
Yeah. So, to put it lightly, I guess there have been quite a few nights where I had trouble going home at that bar.
I could imagine.
Yeah.
We've been chatting this afternoon, everybody, to Simon, who's an Australian working in a Trunk Hotel, Tokyo bar there. He writes from my website about crafting Japanese gins. And we've got a few minutes left before we wrap this chat up, and I'm going to save it and put on my YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So if you've just tuned in, you've missed a bit, I'll put that up there next couple of days and send the link around. Question about notice, Simon. You've written some really lovely articles for the website about craft gins in Japan and the Tokyo Gin Festival, for example. It seems to be coming at a rapid rate. Like, there's a lot of diversity still in the gins that I've experienced. I had one from Okinawa recently that had almost a very winey kind of base to it. Sorry, a rice base to it, very pronounced. Is that still a thing? Like, the situation went separately, but is there a fast-moving target in terms of the way craft gins are emerging in Japan?
I think it has slowed down a little bit. Like, I guess this year, especially for the first few years of production here in Japan, there were so many products coming out, and I guess not so much consistency, unfortunately. So probably in the first year you saw 100 to 200 new products coming out on the market, but they weren't necessarily good.
Right.
You know, you had some stellar products coming out, like Kinobi, like Komasa, like Nika Cafe, Roku, those sort of gins, Sakurao. It has definitely slowed down, but I do see that a lot of the new things coming out are of a lot higher quality than the first couple of years.
Because I know some ones I've tried, and the one I just tried recently was really quite frankly, and Kinobi, if you touched on, it's just divine, absolutely incredible. So it's interesting. And when you did the piece about the Tokyo Gin Festival, one of the things I got from that, which was surprising, was that it sounded as if the locals were still getting their head around gin as well, in a general sense. Did I get that right?
No, you've taken the understanding completely correctly. Well, I think the general understanding about gin is still very loose, and I think that's why a lot of these places that maybe yourself and myself trying would sort of be, this is not gin. Like that would be our impression, but I guess it's still very loose in that sense about what is the definition of gin. So distilleries do have a lot of freedom, which can be good, can be bad, for better or for worse.
But that must make it harder for the locals then to kind of get their head around, unless they're guided by someone like yourself in a bar. If they think gin, but they try something that's completely different because it's a sake base or it's a, whatever premise. And the drinking culture is a little bit different as well to boot. So it must be a very interesting moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for me, not so much for Trunk because we are more cocktail focused, but working my bar out in Kawasaki with my friend that I was doing every weekend, I was always, for new customers especially, we would start with London Dry. We would always start with London Dry and work our way from there.
Yeah.
So if they just came in and said, okay, what's your recommendation? I would always try and, put them in the direction of London Dry, and then throughout the night try and expand. Because if you start with something like, let's take Komasa, for example. Excellent Japanese gin, only 3 botanicals, coriander seed, juniper, and mikan, so mandarin. But it is a short shoot base. Tastes amazing, but again,
it's its own thing.
It's completely its own thing. It's not. If you drank that for the first time and thought that was gin, and then you had a London Dry, you would again be
confused.
You'd be very confused to think that was the same product. But so I do always try to create a base of understanding before we start playing with their perceptions there.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. Simon, it's been really great to talk to you, and everyone who's tuned in today. I'm going to let you off the hook now, and you can go back to your world. I'm going to save this, put it up on YouTube next couple of days. And it's the first that Simon and I have actually spoken to each other after all these years.
Yeah, it sounds hilarious because we've been chatting for years on the web, but excellent talking to you.
Overdue. So you stay well, and I look forward to actually having a drink with you in person before too long, Simon.
You too.
So take care. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, guys. Take care of yourselves. Chat soon. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Good night.